Hello again. For now, part two of Kaiser to Council. We're going to cover from Nero or right after Nero until Marcus Aurelius. So our timeline in this general series, Kaiser to Council, Julius Caesar, 44 BC until the Second Council of Nicaea in 787. So this video, we're going to start with the year of the four emperors, which was the year 69 and the kind of aftermath of Nero's suicide. And then we're going to finish with Marcus Aurelius's death in the year 180. Some notable things in this time period, we have the famous Jewish revolt, which climaxed with the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, which continued on until 74 during this period. Another one is another Jewish revolt, Bar Kokhba revolt in 132 to 135. Some notable things and figures to note during this period, we have Clement of Alexandria. We also have the final books of the New Testament were generally composed during this period. We have Ignatius of Antioch died during this period. Eusebius thinks 107, others will date it as late as 180, basically during this period. Polycarp allegedly died or was executed February 155, as well as one of my favorite of the Apostolic Father texts, known as the Shepherd of Hermas, was composed during this period. Some other figures to note, Irenaeus of Lyons. We will do a video of him coming up soon. Also, the early apologists like Justin Martyr. We're going to do a video of him next. Then we have Theophilus of Antioch, as well as Athenagoras of Athens. All amazing figures, which we will cover in coming up videos. Also of note during this period is that we now have written evidence of what the Romans thought about the Christians from people like Pliny the Younger, Tacitus, and Suetonius. Generally, their perspective was that the Christians or Christianity was a gross superstition. Tacitus actually uses the word deadly superstition. Galba, the aged governor of Spain, rallies his troops. He's on his way to Rome to fill this power vacuum left by Nero. And so he marches slowly to Rome, gets there, and refuses to bribe the senators and to fill their pockets. So they don't really like him much. And so he doesn't reign for very long. He had some good ideas, but he was a bit of an older guy and reluctant anyways. So then Marcus Salvius Otho, one of his greatest supporters, actually rallies the Praetorian Guard and assassinates Galba in the Forum in January of the year 69. So then Otho became the second of these four emperors. Now, before even Otho had done this, Aulus Vitellius up in southern Germany or southern Germania, who's the governor there, is declared emperor by his legions there. So he decides to march on Rome. While he's on his way to Rome, that whole kerfuffle with Otho happens, and 3 months later, in April of 69, Vitellius marches down and battles with Otho, and Cremona wins the war. Otho then kills himself. Vitellius now is the new emperor, welcomed by the Senate. Now, he didn't bribe the Senate, so they didn't like him either. Apparently, Otho did. Then we have Titus Flavius Vespasianus, would be his Latin title. We know him as Vespasian. Now, where was he? What was going on here? He was over near Jerusalem, sieging the city that was destroyed in the year 70. But from the year 66, the Jews had begun a revolt. So Nero had appointed the governor of Africa, Vespasian, to deal with this kerfuffle. One of our sources for this would be Josephus, his book, The Jewish Wars. Now, Vespasian, getting some ideas and deciding to set himself up as emperor, put his hat in the ring, decides to march away to Rome, leaving the siege of Jerusalem in the capable hands of his son Titus. So he marches down to Egypt. The prefect of Egypt declares him emperor. As you know, the Oprah of the ancient world seems to be going around, "You're an emperor, you're an emperor, you're an emperor." Right, so Vespasian marches to Rome with the support of northern Africa as well. So then comes to Italy in the south. He has troops that are supporting him from the Danube in the north, and both come down, surround Rome, and actually at the same place, Cremona, he defeats Vitellius, and so then Vespasian is welcomed into Rome as the new emperor.
He generally had a very good ruled for 10 years, and quickly established peace. Began the construction of the Colosseum as well. Yes, before this, the Colosseum was not in Rome. So then he dies in the year 79. His son Titus, having been victorious over the Jewish revolt in the year 74, finally bring it to an end, comes to Rome, builds a triumphal arch that stands now beside the Colosseum. And he also finished the Colosseum. So then Titus then is now king, now emperor. He commemorates the Colosseum with 100 days of games. Now, he had some difficult things to deal with in his reign. For example, Mount Vesuvius eruption and the destruction of Pompeii. Then also the Italian plague happens during his reign. Allegedly, he might have died from this plague. Although there's also rumors that his younger brother Domitian kind of helped along his early death in the year 81, which is when Domitian took over as the only available heir, the younger brother to Titus. And he was a bit resentful of being overlooked after having garnered support in Rome for his father to kind of pave the way for his father to take over and start this new Flavian dynasty. Domitian was resentful and paranoid and very tyrannical and liked to call himself Lord God, and really liked it when you called him that. Didn't like the Christians. Now, allegedly, we don't really have any evidence of him actually persecuting the Christians in any broad scale scheme or any situation, but there is evidence that he didn't like them. Beyond that, we don't know. So in September of the year 96, it finally came to a head. The senators gathered with the Praetorian Guard and Domitian's own family gathered together, stabbed him to death in his own chambers. It's a fun story if you look it up. It's very darkly comical. Anyways, Nerva, rumored to be one of those conspirators among the Senate, is then declared the next emperor. Now, oddly, they hunt down and kill all the conspirators. Maybe Nerva tried to cover up, but Nerva then became the first of the 5 good emperors, and beginning the period that Edward Gibbon, in his monumental work, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, Gibbon declares this period as being kind of the pinnacle of Rome. And following Marcus Aurelius, the last of the 5 good emperors, is when we have the beginning of this decline and fall. Nerva reigns for only a couple years. Very good reign, being 66 years old. There's not really a whole lot when he began to reign. There's not a whole lot of suspicion about how he died in January of 98. Marcus Ulpius Praiannis, you might know him as Trajan, then succeeds him. He was declared emperor while he was governor up in northern Germania, and he decided to stay there and govern the empire from one of the provinces for over a year. So then he comes to Rome. Now we're seeing the beginning of Rome as an actual locale geographic city beginning to lose its prominence, that the emperor can do his thing anywhere. So where is the capital? Like, is it actually in Rome? Where is the best place for the emperor to be to fulfill his duties? But Trajan comes. Some things he's known for is expanding the Roman borders as well through Germania, as well as into Parthia, push the border to Euphrates. There was even a Jewish diaspora war also in Alexandria for 2 years, in the year 115 to 117, over, quote, a messianic dispute. We don't know a whole lot about this. So then Trajan dies in the year 117. Allegedly on his deathbed, he declared his cousin / great nephew-in-law, Hadrian, as his successor. Some senators from the east didn't like this, but they were executed, so all's good. But then the General Senate didn't seem to really like Hadrian. He didn't like them. He didn't really like being in Rome. So after a few years of being emperor, decides to go on a road trip. He decides to see the empire. After about 5 years, comes back for a couple years, then goes out again. Altogether, Hadrian spent less than 9 years in Rome and over 12 years abroad, surveying the empire and building things. He's known for a lot of the stuff he built, including the wall, the Hadrian's Wall in England. During this time, Simeon Bar Kokhba, the Jewish Messiah, is declared to have come in the year 132. So beginning what's called the Bar Kokhba revolt in the year 132 to 135. Bar Kokhba is Aramaic for son of a star, which was his messianic title. Also known as Prince of Israel was another of his titles. Allegedly, this revolt began or was triggered by Hadrian deciding to rebuild Jerusalem that had been sitting in rubble for over 60 years. So he decides to rebuild it and call it Aelia Capitolina, after the god Jupiter, and set up a temple to Jupiter as the capital god. So, of course, the Jews just loved that, didn't they? Like, oh, wonderful, a temple to Jupiter, where the temple of Yahweh used to be. Nope. Also, possibly as a result of this war, could be the catalyst for the war, both circumcision as well as reciting the Shema, studying Torah, and practicing Sabbath were all outlawed. And Jews were completely expelled from the city of Jerusalem once it was rebuilt. So it became officially a pagan city. Also, interestingly, during this time is kind of where we now see no more Jews as being a part of the church. The church is now purely Gentile, ethnically speaking. We'll probably do a video on Jews in the church at some later point. So then Hadrian dies in the year 138 and is succeeded by Antoninus Pius, who had a long, peaceful reign. Not a whole lot is known of him because it was generally peaceful, uneventful, which is a good thing. Again, why he is one of the 5 good emperors. One thing he's known for is that he restricted the use of torture among prisoners and interrogations. So that's a good thing. He was succeeded by Marcus Aurelius, his nephew. Yes, the same emperor who is killed at the beginning of the movie, The Gladiator. So Marcus Aurelius, interestingly, was originally established as co-emperor in the year 161 with his adopted brother Lucius Verus. Now, Lucius Verus was appointed to be the next emperor by Hadrian. Now, Antoninus Pius couldn't go back on the word of Hadrian, but he wanted Marcus Aurelius, so he just put them both as co-emperors. Lucius Verus took advantage of the fact that Marcus Aurelius was a good emperor, and Lucius Verus was a bit of a party boy, reckless. When he was sent on campaign to Parthia in the year 161, stops at resorts and has a lot of, let's just say, inappropriate fun along the way. And also he did marry Marcus Aurelius' daughter, so in the movie where Maximus meets the boy of the grandson of Marcus Aurelius, and he says, "My name is Lucius Verus, after my father." Yep, that's historically accurate there. But Lucius Verus brought the plague back with him from Parthia in the year 166 and was then subsequently died 3 years later while on campaign in the northern part of the Roman Empire. So then in 169, Aurelius became the sole emperor. Some things he's known for is the book Meditations. He is known as the Stoic emperor, a lover of Greek philosophy. In the year 177, 3 years before he died, he appointed his son Commodus as co-emperor, and people refer to that choice as his only failure. He was a great emperor, apart from the fact that he appointed Commodus as his successor. Yeah, we'll get into Commodus in the next video. Just before we leave, a quick note on Roman attitude towards Christians. In this period, we actually have some accounts of this being published. We have Pliny the Younger, the nephew to Pliny the Elder, who actually died in the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Pliny the Younger was a governor over in what would be now northern Turkey, wrote some letters to Trajan. In one of the letters, he's asking about, what do I do with these Christians? How do I handle them? They don't seem that bad, but, people keep reporting them and we know they're bad. Why? What do I do? Trajan responds with this, and this is my translation. He says, they should not be hunted. If they should be brought in or proven to be Christians, they should be punished. So he's basically saying, just leave it alone. But, if they're reported and they don't deny Christ, kill them or punish them. So the main issue from this perspective is that the Christians don't sacrifice to the Roman gods or to the deified emperor. This is a problem kind of tantamount today as if someone didn't vote or didn't pay their taxes or was like stomping on a Canadian flag or an American flag. That would be very problematic. Or like if you're in the States, you have the Declaration of the Independence, or the Pledge of Allegiance, and someone starts booing during that pledge. That was kind of how people perceived the Christians refusing to sacrifice to the gods. It was very problematic for them. So we have Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus, known as Suetonius. He says this in his books: Nero afflicted punishments on the Christians, the kind of men of a new and gross superstition, or it could be translated as malicious superstition. It's interesting that he gives a lot of detail on Nero and what he did, but that's the only phrase he has about the Christians during that period. Publius Cornelius Tacitus, or we know him as Tacitus, in his Annals of the Roman Emperors, he gives a little bit more detail. He has a couple paragraphs describing this persecution, and it's from Tacitus. We have the accounts of Nero burning the Christians as torches and things like this. But this is what he says. Nero punished the notoriously depraved Christians, as they were properly called. Their founder, Christus, was killed during the reign of Tiberius in the procuratorship of Pontius Pilatus. This deadly superstition grew up again, all sorts of atrocious and shameful practices. Now, allegedly, what are these atrocious and shameful practices that the Christians do? Well, there are records among people that Christians were known for having orgies, kind of coming from that whole notion of greet one another with a holy kiss. And a lot of their services were done behind closed doors. Also, they were accused of cannibalism, accused of eating babies with the Eucharist, where Jesus said, "This is my body, take and eat." And so this was then elaborated among the early Romans. Now, before we go, I'd like to finish with a quote from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations that I think is fitting for this whole series. Marcus Aurelius says, "This advice from Epicurean writings, I think continually of one of the men of old who lived a virtuous life." And that's what we're doing. We're thinking about the men of old who lived virtuous lives. Most of these emperors, not so much, but we're going to get into Justin Martyr in the next video.